Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you. Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for our weekly news recap from Behind Enemy Lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. Oof, excuse me, sorry. I kind of took control there for a moment. Fox, my co-host, take it away.
Yeah, how dare you, Dire. All right, well, as always, we have a great show for you tonight. Some of us are a little more eager than others. But first, we have to thank our sponsors. This show is only possible because of viewers like you. We would especially like to thank those of you who donate to us financially, including Kaylette, Ori Main, Nathan, Cameron, Tetris Freak, Slowpoke, Thundra Erican, The White Lion, who's a lion, The Timber Wolf, who's a wolf, The White Wolf, who is also a wolf, and probably also Dire Wolf, who's also
white.
Money is not the only way you can give, though. We also appreciate you liking and subscribing to us on DLive, Twitch, YouTube, and Rumble. Give us those rumbles, guys. We need more rumbles. We don't know what they do or how they work, but
we have 32 of them.
We would like NFTs and Bitcoin. We just want it because I don't know why. Why not? And we would especially like it if you shared links to any of those sites, as obviously, the algorithms are not going to be sharing those for us. Thank you.
Correct.
Dire, can you do some filler for like about 45 seconds? I have to change a setting.
Absolutely. So Triumvirate on Rumble, where you guys should definitely be following us right now, says, make like Dire with doorknobs and crush it.
That is true.
So here's a word of the day. Have you ever heard of charcuterie? Charcuterie is a platter of crackers, cheese, and meats.
They're delicious.
Yes, and I only looked up that word because I wanted a counter word for the word that Fox just introduced me to of crudité.
Crudité.
Which apparently is a platter of vegetables.
Yes, which sounds terrible. Sounds like absolute misery.
Yeah, gross vegetables. This is a great video. We might be showing you later on of a guy eating meat in front of some vegans and them getting very angry about it. I think that's my new favorite counter protest: is cutting up, butchering meat, and then cooking it and eating it.
Just putting meat in your mouth in public.
Yes. We should definitely try to normalize putting meat in your mouth in public.
So I know that you're like an avid meat eater and you would never be caught dead being a vegan, but is it possible that maybe you've been vegan at certain points due to the you've told me these horror stories about this mystery chicken on all the bases that you've been deployed to? Is it possible some of the mystery has been that they're not even chicken?
I mean, I feel like it's more down to people not like hating their job and not trying to cook well, and also even if they wanted to cook well, their hands are tied on what they're allowed to do to cook. Like they're not allowed to put seasoning on it. I think it's probably more that, but honestly, the effect of you being a terrible cook because you hate your job and also not being allowed to cook properly might produce the same kind of, shitty food as if it were not actually meat. You might be right there.
Here's a question. Would you rather have an impossible chicken nugget or have to eat another bowl of the Cajun chicken prepared by locals in the Middle East?
Is death an option?
Actually, it is, and that's one of our stories coming up here. Good segue.
All right, let's move to our funny comment.
All righty. So, as you guys know, Dire got a little ahead of himself on the show today, and he tried to take control. The real secret of Dire Wolf Media is that it's actually my company, and I control Dire Wolf. And sometimes he just speaks without, being prompted. In a similar way, Joe Biden also is not master of his own White House. There's actually the White House itself is an entity, and Joe Biden just happens to be living there. And sometimes things like this happen.
Thank you so much. Tell me how you do that. I understand it. I mean, it's clear in its face. You're accurate. But how, in making the case of the freedom men have, what do you do to, other than to sort of embarrass men into getting into the argument and voting the right way on this issue?
Thank you so
Tell
much.
me how you do that.
Is this the right clip?
It's not. Sorry, that's the same event, but right after he says that, he apologizes for taking control and gets whisked off away from the room because they start asking questions. Because he asked a question back.
All right. Well, Dyer's going to find the real clip that he meant to play here. I'm going to play a game where I replay this clip, and I'm going to try to interpret what Biden said. Let's go.
Thank you so much.
Tell me how you do that. I understand it.
All right. Tell me how you do that. I understand that. So Joe Biden simultaneously implying that he doesn't understand, but also he wants to caveat that he's no dummy. He does understand, but he doesn't understand. So please clarify.
I mean, it's clear in its face. You're accurate. But
So the true truth on the face of it, it appears to be a real thing. However, on a deeper level, on an emotional level, on a fake news level, we don't like the ramifications of it. So please continue to explain it to me.
how, in making the case of the freedom men have,
All right. So the freedom men have, implying that women do not have the same freedoms. Now, what could this possibly be in reference to? I have no idea.
what do you do to, other than to
Just put it in the notes there.
sort of embarrass men into getting into the argument and voting the right way?
All right. So how do we get men to vote the right way? That's not to say that we don't live in a democracy, but how do we trick people into voting how we want them to vote so that on the face of it, it's still a democracy, but on a deeper level, it's the equivalent of me just doing what I want to do, like
Or
a
is it
dictator.
how to force someone to vote some way? Not vote because they're voting for what they believe in or their principles, but how do I force someone to vote? Is what he's asking.
I don't know.
On this issue.
Thank you.
It's very clear. Very clear.
If you
Thank you,
vote,
Joe
if you
Biden.
force someone to vote, is it still democracy?
Or if you trick them.
Either
All
way.
right. All right. Here's also Joe Biden at that same event.
Where everybody thought anything would go.
Wow, I gotta really boost the audio on that one. Jesus.
Where everybody thought anything would go.
Thank you so much.
Where everybody thought anything would go.
I don't even know what he said.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for
Oh, I'm sorry. I took control. I shouldn't do that. I'm not allowed to do that. Go ahead. You
I
tell
think we're
me.
going to go ahead and have the rest of the conversation closed press. So thank you all so much.
All right. So Joe Biden
Sad.
he's trying to talk about something. I don't even know what he was saying before that. He was just like actually just mush in his mouth. Must be that stutter. And then, I'm sorry, I took control. You always see this like fear in his eyes of like when he realizes he's gone off script and his handlers are gonna come get him. Like I wonder what they do to him off camera.
He's the president, supposedly. Shouldn't he be in control? Shouldn't he be taking control of his office and setting the agenda? Why is it that constantly, over and over again, he is apologizing to his staff for not following their guidelines, their agenda? If he doesn't run the agenda, if he doesn't set the schedule, then he's not the fucking president. Which, I mean, it's obvious. That's why the White House has its own press releases separate from him that often disagree.
Yes. Alrighty. Well, so obviously that's as we know from the media, that's Joe Biden stuttering, and Joe Biden's always had a stutter, except for when he's really passionate about something. When he's really passionate about something, he finds clarity in his voice, like he did this clip that recently resurfaced from the 2008 election. Here's Joe Biden excitedly proclaiming, I guess just his pride in certain things about his ancestry and the soil and the blood that he came from.
You're in South Carolina right now on the campaign trail. 30 seconds or less. What kind of a chance would a northeastern liberal like Joe Biden stand in the South if you were running in Democratic primaries against Southerners like Mark Warner and John Edwards?
Better than anybody else. And you don't know my state. My state was a slave state.
And you're in South.
Jeez Louise. So the question was about, hey, you're running against people who are from these regions. Why would the voters vote for you, someone not from this region? And he's like, well, shoot, I came from a slave state, so these racist Southerners should still be able to vote for me. What the fuck?
And that's not the only time Joe's brought that up. Let's see here. So from the Free Beacon, again, this is just a recently resurfaced clip because it's funny. Not necessarily a new or breaking story, but so here, then Senator Joe Biden of Delaware touted his state of Delaware as being a former slave state as part of his appeal to Southerners during the run-up to the 2008 presidential bid. Let's see here. In 2006 appearance on Fox News Sunday with anchor Chris Wallace, Chris Wallace asked Biden about how he could win places like South Carolina when hailing from a blue state. What quote from Joe Biden? Wallace asked, quote, "What kind of chance would a northern liberal like Joe Biden stand in a southern state if you were running in a Democrat primaries against Southerners like Mark Warner and John Edwards?" Wallace asked. "Better than anybody else," Biden replied, "and you don't know my state. My state was a slave state. My state is a border state. My state is the 8th largest black population in the country. My state is," probably because you're a slave state. "My state is anything."
Are they there by choice?
Yeah, my state is anything from a northeast liberal state. Let's see here.
So was he saying he was banking on the Democrat racist vote?
I believe so. Joe Biden would go on to continue explaining Delaware, saying Delaware was, quote, a slave state that fought beside the North. He said, "That's only because we couldn't figure out how to get it to the South." There were a couple of states in the way. The remarks weren't favorably received. CBS News' Vaughn Verners asked why it wasn't considered a scandal, while communist Kathleen Parker wrote Biden playing, quote, redneck was embarrassing.
Wow.
Yeah, well.
That was a stutter, right?
It was a stutter. It was probably a big stutter. Said slave state. I mean, it's it's just slave state. It could happen to anybody, Dyer. Anybody.
Right. All right. So let's move on to our first story then. So we're just going to be a quick update to the Mar-a-Lago raid.
Yes, it'll be a quick update, not 50 to 90 minutes update.
We covered a lot of information last time, so we don't need to recover it on this show. So the Trump had requested the release of the affidavit that was the basis for the search warrant, and initially the FBI said we can't do that, and then the judge says, well, no, you should. It's important to the country that we release the affidavit, the premises for the search, because it's an unprecedented action. So then the FBI responded with, okay, judge, here's our suggested redactions, and that judge is like, yeah, sure, looks okay. 80% of it is black lines. So the vast majority of it is blacked out or redacted. And as anyone would assume, the only things, the fragment sentences that are there are all things that are accusing Trump of stuff, and none of the evidence or sources for those claims. That's kind of what you'd expect the FBI to do, is only put down things that could be considered derogatory to Trump, though I think Fox and I will be able to talk to you about how they really weren't bad, or explained, and then exclude their basis for those arguments. So the affidavit includes, in quotes, there is this statement is in quotes inside the affidavit. There is also probable cause to believe that evidence of the obstruction will be found at the premises. That's what it says. So the affidavit says that there is evidence of obstruction, but does not present what those evidence is or the source of the claim of evidence. Then it also says, written by an unidentified FBI agent in training, trained in counterintelligence espionage, says that that the agents suspect Trump of hiding intelligence information related to signals collection, human resources, and other top secret information. Now, signals collection is like our ways of collecting intel related to like electronic means, right? And human sources is someone who is a source for intel, an individual or group of individuals that we're using. So they're saying that Trump has documents that refers to the ways we're collecting intelligence of top secret intelligence. Now, that very well could be any one of his daily intel briefings he received, which happened at Mar-a-Lago. It could be any fragment or note he wrote down on a piece of paper after receiving one of those briefings.
This page 10, man, is a real nail biter here. Yeah, page 10 is wow, 29. Oof. Man, I can't believe 29 and 28. Wow. I mean, Trump's definitely guilty. Look at this.
So if they believed he had these things, there was already a process where they were allowed to come down and look through the documents and take what documents, or at least go through the process of collecting those documents if they really did have that kind of information, right? They already came down and looked at it and didn't take those documents.
Well, and I mean, look at the kind of information Trump was trying to keep from the public. I mean, number 32 here. I mean, like, this is it, guys. I mean, this is what, wow.
Yeah.
Man.
So the next thing.
Whoa. 37, man. Look at that. Look at that.
Scandalous.
Wow.
So the affidavit also include that that suspicion came out of the 15 boxes that Trump returned to the archives in January. The affidavit said agents discovered 184 unique documents bearing classification markings, 67 documents marked as confidential, 92 marked as secret, and 25 documents marked as top secret. Now, does that matter if they have been declassified by Trump? Their markings don't matter. Doesn't mean they still are classified.
Yeah. So the way one former White House official described this on one of the many interviews, is that the FBI and the intelligence agencies have kind of a fetish for these confidential markings. They really fetishize having that C or some kind of mark on the document because they don't get to decide what is and is not classified, but they can help enforce and they can categorize things as classified. And so they really like to see that symbol there because that's what justifies their use of power and authority and gives them kind of a purpose for existing. And so, again, as Dyer said, it's really irrelevant as to whether or not the markings were on the documents because the markings would be an indelible part of the document. It's irrelevant to the fact that Trump would have declassified them.
Yeah. So the affidavit also included that markings referenced human sources, FISA records to be kept away from foreign nationals and signal intelligence. So it basically, in addition to all the classifications, it also included like secret, no foreign. That's another marking that goes in the paper. They kind of like they're separating it, but no foreign is a separate classification marking, just like secret is.
Yeah, you actually can see right here on page 17. I just happen to be flipping through this. Several of the documents also contains what appears to be F. POTUS's handwriting. Wait, what's F. POTUS? Former POTUS. Former President of the United States' handwritten notes. Which, again, those are the types of documents that are born classified. Anything Trump writes down is born classified. However, are we to believe that the Trump's writing a note while he's in the White House and then taking that note home with him after not being president anymore, that is worthy of an FBI raid, that maybe Trump will read his handwritten note, and then thus President Trump's security will be hampered by civilian Trump in the past and the future? And then, he'll look at a picture of Barron playing the guitar, and then his handles start to disappear. And if Trump doesn't play the right song and get his parents to meet again, it could be over for all of us.
So, I mean, Trump has the security clearance and right to know these things and have these secret classified materials. He also, these materials were stored in a SCIF, so they were properly secured, and they were in the possession of someone who's allowed to see them.
And we actually learned that last week when I had said, okay, well, we keep hearing that, Trump was storing these in and again, Trump's people, whoever, they were storing it in a room in Mar-a-Lago. And, I said something to the effect of like, well, maybe that's not a secure location, but the role of the FBI post presidency would be to assist Trump in designing and creating a secure location for these things. Trump, being the former president, as is traditional, still maintains a security clearance and will still often receive I don't know if Trump in particular is, but it's very common for former presidents to continue to receive security briefings. And there must be some place where they can do that at. And so my assumption is that all former presidents have probably secure rooms or locations where they are able to receive, view, and interact with classified materials. And so in this case, the FBI's role would be to help Trump design a SCIF or a secure room for him to look at these things in. However, we found out last week that that's exactly the type of room that Trump was storing it in. Because Trump spent so much time at Mar-a-Lago during his presidency, they actually built a SCIF there, a secure room, where he was able to store and interact with classified information. So the information was like, unless the FBI is disagreeing with the the protocols and best practices of SCIFs in general, then it's literally impossible for Trump to have handled the material inappropriately if they were within a SCIF. I mean, as like you've probably interacted with or heard of SCIFs and locations that you've been. I mean, if you are inside the SCIF, is it possible for that material to be improperly viewed inside the SCIF? I mean, it's just, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, you're supposed to be secure who goes in there. But so, I mean, as long as they're the only people who have access to the secure documents are allowed into the SCIF. I mean, there is like suggested storage requirements. Like I would probably have my comm guys freak out if they saw me storing classified in a box on the ground, but it wouldn't. It'd still be secured inside of the room.
Yeah, but a SCIF is a SCIF is a SCIF. I mean, it's.
Now, I also want to
preferences, but it's a SCIF.
I also want to point out that there's also the issue of this is not the first time a president has taken classified documents that they were their documents, the documents they produced and received, intel briefs and stuff. It's not the first time they've taken those documents to their homes and had them declassified as they left the White House. It happened with Bush. It happened with Obama. And there was similar long legal proceedings between them and the archives. The archives trying to make sure, take those documents, but then them saying, no, these are, according to the Presidential Records Act, these are our records that we're allowed to have.
And then there's the Clintons who, when they left, they took anything that wasn't nailed down. I mean, Hillary was stealing china and like dishes, China.
Right.
Also China, the country. Hillary was stealing china and furniture from the White House. I mean, that's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's happened. And so like, you have, and Obama is still having negotiations with the National Archives because he has a bunch of documents that he wants to have the originals in the Obama Presidential Library, and he doesn't want to send them to the National Archives. And so they've been working on getting those back from him for 12 years now. So, I mean, there's
a lack of consistency with the DOJ, and also the same thing with Hillary Clinton, who actually had classified materials stored improperly that she didn't have the right to and couldn't declassify. And she wasn't prosecuted, but they are going after Trump, and they're using criminal statutes that would require him have malice and intent to use the classified information against the country.
Well, I mean, I would direct your attention to Part 55 of this affidavit, Dyer. I think Part 55.
No, that pretty clears it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the real, kind of whistle here to be blown is 55. I think it justifies the unnatural use of the FBI to go after political opponents of the sitting president. I think it makes perfect sense. This looks like it's fully justified, as you can see.
I would say that
as
it
you can see
is
here.
such a unprecedented and what's the word, provocative act that it requires that they have pretty damn good reason that they can then show to the people, because they're pushing the people towards violence.
Well, and they don't just have
they
don't just have one good reason. As you can see here, we're up to 58 good reasons, Dyer.
that are all obscured from us. So now you can still, through legal action, push to have more of the document declassified or unredacted. But you got to ask, why are they redacting so much to absurdity? I doubt it's just to protect people. I think it's to protect themselves from having done something that was unjustified. But hey, Fox, how about you talk about what their stated reasons were?
Alrighty. Well, we can see here, black.
There's notes.
I know. All right. So the DOJ stated the reasons for the redactions, even though they shouldn't have had to. What do you think we are? You think we live in not Soviet Russia, guys? I mean, how dare you ask the DOJ for their reasons? They did it. Is that not reason enough?
They don't need oversight. They're the deep state. They get to.
Goes, what are you, an insurrectionist?
You're gonna miss the deep state when they're gone.
Yeah, be a patriot and just take the fact that they did it as reason enough. But because you weirdo freedom fighters, how dare you? You guys have this weird Constitution cult or whatever. Yeah, you had to get reasons from the DOJ. So their stated reasons for redacting was that the redactions needed to be made to, quote, protect the safety of multiple civilian witnesses whose information was included throughout the affidavit. See, you guys are trying to put in danger. No, you're trying to kill multiple civilian witnesses. How dare you? You're a murderer.
Yeah, what do they think?
What's
Trump's
wrong with
gonna
you?
Do to them? Do you think Trump's going to put a hit out on them?
Trump's going to get Russia to put a hit on him.
Yeah.
All right. Let's hear. So another reason the DOJ stated was that agents are investigating potential obstruction of justice violations of the Presidential Records Act, unlawful possession of national defense information, and the damaging of government records.
Those aren't criminal statutes. There's no punishment under that, the Presidential Records Act. So what is the purpose of investigating it if there's no punishment?
So those would be like civil crimes, like they're not like criminal crimes.
No, they're administrative crimes. Like basically, he could get fired if he was a military member.
Yeah. Okay. So these are, again, we went over this a few weeks ago. So like, you showing up late to work isn't illegal, but it's against the rules at your work, and they can fire you for it. So the FBI or the police or like the sheriff is not going to investigate why you punched in 7 minutes late for the 8th time this week. They're not going to investigate that. There's no reason to. It's not a crime. It's against the rules, but it's not a crime.
So they're acting like it's a criminal statute when it's not. It's insane.
Trevor's asking, so did they give all the FBI agents top secret clearance, because wouldn't those agents also be in violation of unlawful possession of classified documents?
No.
Now, I believe that there is some kind of workaround for that. However, they wouldn't need to have clearance because all these documents weren't classified. They know that.
Do they have the declassification clearance, though? I don't
know. Let's see. Another reason the DOJ stated for the redactions was that they suggested that agents had evidence of obstruction permeated the documents. Evidence of obstruction permeated the documents, with prosecutors saying that they have, quote, well-founded concerns that redacted. Yeah, how about that? Now, they have well-founded concerns that steps may be taken to frustrate or otherwise interfere with this investigation if the facts in the affidavit were prematurely disclosed. No.
So the
dastardly.
The archives, the National Archives, said that Trump was cooperating with them. And though the process was slow because they're having to justify what documents they're going to take for Trump, and Trump is waiting for them to go through the legal process to validate they really need those things, he was going through them and letting them view the records on demand with no restrictions. So there was no evidence they were able to provide that he had destroyed any documents. They were sitting there waiting to be reviewed in the same boxes they came in. He hasn't even stored them anywhere differently. He hasn't started organizing them in his office. He has done nothing to them. So unless they want to unredact said evidence, I don't believe them. They also said there was credible evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, right? That wasn't true. They also said there was credible evidence that he was doing a quid pro quo with the Ukrainians. That wasn't true.
And a pro quid quo.
Yeah, all the quos and quids and quos.
I think page 26 here is actually pretty interesting for two reasons. So there's two things on here that are unredacted. So there is, quote, there is probable cause to believe that documents containing classified NDI, National Defense, I think, National Defense Intelligence, and presidential records remain at the premises. So documents containing classified, okay. But again, they can't be classified. I thought it said markings on there. I read that wrong the first time, so I guess never mind. But also, we can see down here on item 70 that this period is unredacted. What could it possibly mean?
Why would they bother unredacting it?
Is this a mistake? Are we starting to pierce the veil? What does this tell us, Dyer?
If I stare longer, it will start revealing itself.
It will start revealing itself.
So I also want to point out that Trump had received in January of 21, on the 20th, he had received basically a preservation notice. So since that point, Trump has been informed that they wanted to make sure that those documents were not messed with, moved, destroyed, right? So that's probably why they're still sitting in the same boxes they arrived in, because Trump has known, and his staff has known, not to mess with them because they were under a preservation order while they were going through the legal process of determining which documents actually need to go to the National Archives.
Here's the truth there. If you print out this redacted affidavit and you hold it up to the sunlight with the Constitution behind it, and you read the words where the redactions are, it actually is a secret message from Q about the secret space program and about how the Martians stole the last presidential
It would be an uncharacteristically long message from Q, though.
It would be uncharacteristically long. It may be less less poetic, though. Wow. The special agent's name who submitted this is even redacted. Respectfully submitted, redacted. You should change your email signature to that, Dyer. Just be very respectfully redacted. That could be your pronouns. Aren't you allowed to put your pronouns in your email signature now?
Yeah.
Are your pronouns redacted?
Oh yeah.
Ooh, you should do that. You should actually do that. You should file for an official change of your pronouns to be redacted.
The funny thing is you don't have to actually file anything to change your pronouns. You just change them, and then you can, if someone calls you something wrong, you can then seek punishment for them.
You could just do that in your email signature, just put at the end of it redacted and italics, and nobody would even necessarily make the connection that those are supposed to be your pronouns. You just put them in the same spot wherever you guys are supposed to put those in, and they would just think oh, there's something in his footer that's redacted. What is that? And then if you ever get called on it, you can just say, well, it's my pronouns. Well, what are your pronouns? Well, it's redacted, so
exactly. I can't tell you.
Kindly fuck off.
Yeah.
Very
it's
respectfully.
Kind of personal for you to ask me, all right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
So as you guys
gotta be in a
see
skiff
here,
for me to tell you.
Ooh, Exhibit 1's pretty interesting. Oh wait, this is Exhibit 1. Okay, so less redactions on the exhibits, but wow, that was quite a few pages. There was almost less text in this search warrant than there was in Michael Knowles' book, Reasons to Vote Liberal, or Reasons to Vote for Democrats, which was his famous 120-page book that was just all blank pages.
So, the long and short of this is they're trying to prosecute him, trying to make it so he can't run for president because they're so scared that he would win because Biden has done so terribly and the Democrats have done so terribly that they think that that Trump will win. And they're trying to make it so he's not eligible. Even if they can't get a prosecution or a sentence on him, then at least they hope to get him locked up in more legal battles, just like he's been locked up in battles since he became president. They've been pursuing him with lie after lie after lie, and protecting his opponents in protecting their lies. So that's what we have to look forward to, is more of this shit. And because this shows you the depth of depravity and the corruption of the deep state, it is extremely necessary that Trump get into office and have the opportunity to completely dismantle them. Because if they win, they will only become more powerful.
Well, I mean, I think redacted. And I think it's very clear that Trump redacted, and that Biden is also redacted. I think it's
of course he definitely
this is how this is what the teleprompter looks like in Joe Biden's mind as he's reading it.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, like this is Joe Biden's like memory. It's just a bunch of blank spots. he just fill in the gaps.
On to the next story. How about that?
Alrighty. Well, I'll let you. You put so much effort into crafting that title there, Dyer. We can either just continue on, or you can read it if you'd like.
Okay, so story A2, because we don't go straight to B. We're gonna do A2 first. Student loans.
On Wednesday, you wrote that. I don't know.
Oh,
I had no idea what you were talking about. You wanted me to laugh at you, and I don't know what it meant.
That is a typo.
Well, maybe you should have looked at
Biden
that.
blows his load in Banana Republic. Sorry.
All right, let's just skip to the story. So on Wednesday, good job. On Wednesday, Joe Biden announced that he was forgiving approximately $500 billion of student loan debt. Awesome. During his announcement, he also announced that they were extending the student loan payment pause, which was scheduled to end in 2 days. They're extending that through the end of December. Joe Biden, during his speech, said, quote, it is, let's see here. It's, quote, student loan payments pause is going to end. It's going to end December 30. I'm extending it to December 31st, 2022. It's going to end at that time. It's time for payments to resume. So basically, to translate that is, it's time for payments to resume, which is why I'm extending the pause to Davashufrada. That's what Joe Biden said. Alrighty, so there are also, he's forgiving $10,000 per student loan borrower if you still have federal student loans. So how much are you going to get? So there's going to be 2 tiers of forgiveness. The first tier will get $10,000 of their federally held student loan debt canceled or paid for by the taxpayer if and only if they make under $125,000 per year, or a combined $250,000 for household income for married couples, which is a lot of money. $125,000 per year puts you at about the 90th percentile for income in America. So basically everybody but the 10%ers are eligible for this money. The second tier of forgiveness will give you an additional $10,000, so $20,000 in total, if you were a Pell Grant recipient. Pell Grants are somewhere around like $6,000 to $7,000 per year for students who show exceptional financial need. The money does not need to be paid back. So if you received a Pell Grant, you'll get an extra $10,000 of your student debt canceled.
So what you're telling me is, if you already got free money in the past, you qualified for free money in the past, you are now eligible for more free money. It does not include anything like maybe you got a degree that helped you become very wealthy and you no longer like are anywhere close to the same
And
requirements.
it doesn't
as
include
before.
any logic like, oh, well, we already gave you $7,000, so maybe we should only give you $3,000 to add up to $10,000. Instead, they're just like, well, people who already got $7,000, well, they deserve an extra $10,000 as opposed to people who didn't get these $7,000 already. Yeah. Presumably in the future, there will be another welfare program that is dependent on you having received welfare in the past. It's like a rewards program, Dyer. You gotta get in at the ground floor, otherwise you're always going to be behind. You never.
I just hate the idea that you're disconnecting the degree having to drive a job that will then help you pay for to make it worthwhile, right? If you had to get a loan to get a degree, it better be a degree that gets you a job that would justify the loan in the first place. If you are giving these handouts to pay off these loans or forgive these loans, then it just encourages the possibility of people to get these degrees that are worthless, that don't help to add anything to society, because they're being enslaved from the consequences.
The expectation that an 18-year-old is going to be a rational economic actor, that they're going to be the true, embodiment of supply-demand economics and rational economic decision-making is pretty. I think it's not going to result well, as is clear from the current situation that we have.
I think the intent was there for there to be people that would be helping guide students to make smart decisions.
That's what I'm getting to. That's what I'm getting to is that this isn't so much an issue. Yes, the net result is that we've created a very large population, several generations worth of people who just think that, well, I need to get my money bailed out, so I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. That's a problem, but the real source of that problem, the real root of it, is that this was never about. This was the whole college as an institution was never really about educating students so that they can go on to have good jobs, and America will be the best and brightest in finance and science and technology and all that stuff. No. This was about creating a system whereby professors, particularly Marxist professors, could create these weird social justice departments over the last 40 years and have, tens of thousands of them on essentially a welfare program where these professors are receiving exorbitant salaries. They have access to ridiculous campuses where there's all kinds of crazy amenities and a ridiculous benefit system, all paid for by government money that's been laundered through 18-year-olds with the expectation that once those 18-year-olds turn 22, that they'll be the ones stuck with the bill and they'll have to pay it back. So this was basically a giant scam on children for the last 40 years. So is it the fault of the 18-year-olds? Well, a small part, and maybe the way that they react to it is, but the root of the issue is that this was a giant Ponzi scheme or scam, essentially, to trick kids into paying for the luxurious lifestyles of Marxists who would otherwise be unemployable and have nowhere to go to teach their feminist dance theory.
I actually don't blame the student. I blame the colleges that have the counselors that are advising these kids on what classes they're going to do. Then providing classes that they're saying have value, but they know and are like a feminist dance theory class or a women's study class is less expensive to teach. It's less expensive for the school to put on than a career level chemistry course. It is easy for them to provide the classes and sell them to people. It's probably got a far a bigger difference between the cost of education and the amount that's being paid for the degree, right? So they're giving these junk degrees, and I blame the school for that. I blame the university for it because they're not only are they're cheating these students and tricking these students, but are also getting funded by the government to produce nothing good for society. Why is my tax dollars going towards teaching a Marxist to hate our country?
Well, because that's what the Democrats and some of the Republicans in Congress have been voting for the last 40, 50 years. So the the problem is with what you're saying is that it's not necessarily irrational or even a bad suggestion to say, oh, well, go learn feminist dance theory. You have a bright future as a career as a feminist dance theory professor where you can be making $200,000 a year and living at Harvard or someplace. That's a pretty rational economic decision. The problem is it's only a rational economic decision because so much government money, all of the loans that were made available, the subsidization that was made available, it shifted the market, it corrupted the incentive model, and then now you have this ridiculous perverse incentive of generating people who it's perfectly rational from an economic standpoint to go into these things because, well, there's going to be a giant pool of government money there waiting for you. All you have to do is go through these classes and just gather a bunch of debt. Now, go ahead.
I was in Arizona, and I just happened to stop at a college because I didn't know it was a college. I stopped at a cool, like little park for just a rest stop, and it had a nice view over a cliffside. And I was walking through it with my wife and my kids, and then I just came across a sign saying that this park was built with money from the women's study department of the local university. And
I burst into flames.
I flipped my lid, yelling at how expensive all this sculptures and these really expensive benches and equipment and stuff that was like this manicured, like obviously I have people that come by regularly and manicure these gardens. And I was like, this is not what a university was meant for. And my wife got to hear me rant for an hour.
I mean, this was, to go all the way back to, this was a result of Vietnam, where people who would otherwise have gone to college didn't. They got deployed. They got drafted. You had a lot of professors that were also, again, back when college was a real STEM industry. And what filled in the gap? What filled in the gap was Marxist. And they've, over the last 50 years, have done a fantastic job, from their perspective, of turning the university system into a welfare program for Marxists and anti-American radicals who are otherwise completely unemployable, do not have any other skills to speak of, and they just sit there and they just collect these giant paychecks. They get to spend money on frivolous things, and they get to continue making more of themselves, propagating their ideology, because and only because there is government money that is there for the taking for impressionable 18-year-olds to go and agree, oh yes, I will pay $50,000 or $100,000 over the course of the next 30 years to support my Marxist professors. That sounds like a great idea. Now, if you explain it to them like that, they probably wouldn't agree. But that is that's the trick. That's the subversion, the scam that the university system has played on America. And it's easy. It's very easy. And I know a lot of people on our side will, I guess, scapegoat or try to make it the simplest terms by saying, oh, it's these purple-haired feminist 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds and TikTok people. And, yes, that is the net result, but let's not mistake the symptom for the actual cause, because it doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, there's not going to be, you can go after the purple-haired feminists on TikTok all you want. It's not going to change the trillions of dollars that the government has made available for these things to happen. You can make fun of people all you want. You can trigger people all you want. Until the incentive model with the government cash changes, nothing's going to change. And so as Joe Biden has continued to benefit from this system, as the entire left has, as the entire Democrat Party has, he, of course, is giving even more money, making the model even more perverse by offering something like $400 billion for this college forgiveness. And as we just pointed out, how ridiculous it is that Pell Grant recipients get even more money, because if you've already received free government money, why not receive even more? It's great. It's very incoherent to have Pell Grants even be a consideration at all. For instance, I started college 12 years ago what exactly does my parents' financial situation 12 years ago, which is how you receive a Pell Grant. You can only receive a Pell Grant based off your parents' financial situation. So for me, what would my parents' financial situation 12 years ago have to do with my financial situation now? It has like nothing to do with my financial situation now.
Yeah.
It's really the answer is nothing. Like, this is completely unrelated. The Pell Grant thing is just an excuse, any excuse they could possibly come up with, even if it didn't make sense, for them to give out more money, because that's what they were hunting for the last several years. But Joe Biden, as we'll go through what actually authorizes or theoretically authorizes him to do this, he needed a reason. We know that they wanted to give out money to for college debt. The Democrats have been talking about this for years at this point, but they have not been able to find a good reason. There's been a lot of theories as to how they could go about doing it. But at the end of the day, you have to have a real intangible excuse to do something like this. The president can't just give away money. He doesn't control the purse strings. That's Congress.
He also said he doesn't have the power to do so, just like last year.
Yeah. Well, no, Nancy said that last year, unfortunately.
He also said it.
Oh, wow. All right. So, again, this Pell Grant thing is just an excuse. Well, we have this vague relationship between, they needed money, 12, 10, 20 years ago. Maybe that's a good excuse for why they need money now. But don't try to read too much into it looking for some kind of sense. It's not that it makes sense. It's just that it's any excuse, even if it's a bad one. All right. So the estimate right now is that something like 43 million people will receive this government money. And currently there's no word on whether or not there's a citizenship requirement for this. My guess is no. One thing that I think is going to be a particular sticking point in the next couple of weeks is that non-citizens, either here on visas or here undocumented, they are also able to take out federal student loans. You might be concerned, you might be questioning that. They can. It might not be easy, but they can. And so the question is some of this debt forgiveness going to be hitting non-American citizens and even legally here non-citizens? And the answer is almost assuredly yes. Almost assuredly yes. There's not a chance that this money is not flowing to non-American citizens, which is pretty wild. Alrighty, so where is the money to pay this off coming from? Now, again, the White House has estimated $400 billion, which is, as we know from history, anytime the White House estimates how much something's going to cost, it usually comes in right at or just under. They're usually pretty good at calculating that, right, Dara?
No, they're terrible at it.
Wait, I got that backwards. It's usually
way far over.
Yeah, it's usually like not that number at all. It's usually way more.
Sometimes twice the price.
That's really embarrassing, man. I'm so embarrassed. I got that one wrong. I was looking at myself in the mirror and I was repeating over and over again. The White House always lies about how much it's going to cost, and then I just, I get nervous in front of this big audience.
Fox, didn't they say that Trump couldn't reallocate funds because he doesn't have control of the purse strings? Like that's Congress's job, right? And that Trump couldn't allocate funds for a wall, but apparently Biden can allocate funds that wasn't passed by legislation or by Congress. He can reallocate funds for this purpose.
Well, we'll go into why he's able to do that, but it's because, Dyer, I'm a hero. I don't know if you knew that, but I'm a hero.
Well, thank you for your service.
Yes. A hero. The Heroes Act is actually what Joe Biden's using to authorize this. And in full disclosure, I'll go into this a little bit, but I am going to be, in theory, receiving some money out of this. So not necessarily receiving money, but just not having debt as much anymore. I'll get into that because I do want to be transparent with you guys since this is everybody's money. But we'll go into that.
You're welcome.
Yes. I think that there was actually some issues this week with several conservative commentators who were speaking out against the the student loan thing, and then people dug up the COVID small business loan reimbursement program. So like people attributed that to Daily Wire and said that Ben Shapiro took out a bunch of money from the COVID relief funds and then had that forgiven. That has since been proven false, that he did not do that. Steven Crowder also was shown to have taken out $73,000 from COVID relief funds, and he as a grant, and he had that debt forgiven. And that was in the last couple of years here. And that's not been proven not false yet. He's not addressed that, or Stephen's not addressed that or denied that or anything yet, and it appears to be true. The open records, this is all publicly available information, says, you know, Steven Crowder louder with Crowder, so it's pretty obvious that he did that. Which again, not necessarily this segment's not necessarily to talk about the goodness or badness of that. I just want to, when we do get to that point, I will be transparent about what I've taken from this. Direwolf Media, for instance, we did not take any of the COVID relief funds and get a grant for any of that, though we should have. Let's see here. So, first off, how are we going to pay for this? Well, it's very simple. We're gonna pay for it with the deficit, which just means we're going to print that money. Here's what Joe Biden had to say about how we're going to pay for it. Jump out to...
Be clear. I hear it all the time. How do we pay for it? We pay for it by what we've done. Last year, we cut the deficit by more than $350 billion. This year, we're on track to cut it by more than $1.7 trillion by the end of this fiscal year, the single largest deficit reduction in a single year in the history of America. And the Inflation Reduction Act is going to cut it by another $300 billion over the next decade, because Medicare will be paying less for prescription drugs, and over $1 trillion we added out for the next 2 decades. The point is this: there is plenty of deficit reduction to pay for the programs. Cumulative deficit reduction, pay for the programs many times over.
All right, there's plenty of deficit reduction to pay for this program.
But it's not reducing the deficit. It's he's adding less of the deficit, right? Is that what it was?
I wrote you a whole part for it.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. So no. There is not.
All right, let's try that again, Dyer. All right. The point is, there's plenty of deficit reduction to pay for these programs. Come on, man.
No, there is not. That doesn't even make any sense. The first point here is that is how did Joe get a $1.7 trillion deficit reduction? The deficit is that we are the deficit is that we are overspent in a given year over amount of income taken in. So how did Joe do it? We spent an extra $2 trillion per year over the last 2 years on COVID stuff. Now that COVID is over, and it is absolutely expected that the deficit, the amount that we overspent, would be reduced back down. So reducing it by 1.7 trillion is not an accomplishment. It was an expectation of a bare minimum. So he's just not spending as much.
Yeah, we're not
over the last year.
We're not giving every American like $2,000 a year. We're not buying 500 million doses of vaccine this year. We're not spending billions of dollars on 18 different vaccine experiments trying to find the winning silver bullet. We're not doing all of that stuff. We're not doing contact tracing. We're not spending on PPE reduction. We're not spending on all of the subsidies for the airline industry. We're not spending on again the increase in unemployment benefits. We're not doing rent assistance. We're not doing all of that stuff.
You're still adding 300 billion plus to the deficit.
Yes.
That's still bad.
Yes. So all of that stops this year, and that's not that's not free money. So the big second point here is that reduction of 1.7 trillion, that's a cost avoidance. It's not cash in the bank that you can spend on other things. It's, well, we didn't buy 500 million vaccine doses this year. That doesn't mean that you have an equivalent amount of money to spend this year. That was an emergency. We only spent that money because it was an emergency, not because we regularly spent it. You know, you go back 3 years, we weren't spending that equivalent amount of money on something else. And it's like, oh, well, you know, this year we gotta spend it on COVID stuff this year, but you know, once COVID's over, it's now available to spend on other things. No, it was never available. It's deficit. It's not there. If Dyer, if you're you know, if the tire or if like the transmission on your van goes out, right? And so, you know, this month it's like, oh crap, you know, I got $1,000 car repair. I got to put it on the credit card. You know, we'll pay that off over the next few months here. It's just a big expense right off the bat. Next month, when the transmission doesn't go out, do you have an extra $1,000 to spend on stuff?
No, I don't.
Oh, that's weird. Maybe you're not an accountant. Maybe you should get Joe to do your accounting for you.
If I then add another $300 to my debt, it's not that I have gained more.
No, you reduced your monthly spending by $700. I mean, when's the last time you've been able to reduce your monthly spending by $700? I mean, you're doing pretty good.
But when it's still $300 in debt more, it's not an accomplishment.
Well, let's consider this. If instead calling it debt, you call it deficit, which most people don't really know what that means, does it sound better?
It sounds better, but it's still no better.
See? There you go. There you go. So basically what Joe Biden is saying is basically what I just said, is that we overspent by an extra $2 trillion on COVID last year. So since we're not spending that extra money on an emergency this year, that means that money is now available to be spent this year. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all. Now some people, some naysayers, some of you, it's probably the same people who don't just believe that the DOJ has the right to redact stuff and need some kind of explanation from them. You know, non-patriots, as we call you people. Some people are saying that this is going to increase inflation, not reduce it, increase it, increase inflation, increase inflation. Increase inflation. All right, so from Forbes, who interviewed several economists, though their credentials are a little bit in question right now. Let's see here. Student loan forgiveness plan won't make inflation worse, even if it adds $400 billion to the deficit, Goldman Sachs, that's what they mean there, says. Let's see here. So, from Forbes, so this is an interview that they did. So in a Thursday note to clients, economists at Goldman Sachs estimated the Biden administration's plan to discharge $400 billion in student loan balances and lower monthly payments would only have a, quote, small overall impact on spending, boosting gross domestic product by about 0.1% next year and less in subsequent years. So right off the bat here, the gross domestic product increasing in theory, because that's the amount of stuff that you're making. You're making more things. So they're estimating that we're going to have 0.1% more things produced next year. So an increase in production, which is also an increase in supply, that can reduce inflation. However, if there's more people buying things, like, oh, I don't know, say $400 billion more dollars to buy things with, does 0.01%, does that account for that? Does that make up for that? No. If you have an increase in supply, but you have a 5-fold increase in demand because more people have money, well, then your inflation's still going to go up. It wipes out that gain. Let's see here. So Forbes continues. As a result, the forgiveness would have a, quote, similarly small effect on inflation, one that would be, quote, more than fully offset by a separate provision that would end the pause on payments, which has been in place since the start of the pandemic in January of 2023. The team led by chief economist somebody said, noting that the overall effect would help lower inflation slightly. Yeah, so one of the ways that this is going to, quote, lower inflation is that ending the student loan pause will result in something like $50 billion per year being paid back on student loans, which is a lot. And, people having, overall $50 billion less dollars to spend on other things because they're now paying it on their student loans. Yes, that will probably reduce inflation slightly. However, now that inflation has been going so insanely for the last 18 months, you're probably going to see a lot of people that this is just going to utterly collapse them. They don't, all of that extra money that they had. So like for me personally, I had a lot of extra money every month because I haven't been paying on my student loans for the last almost 3 years now, and it's been great. I bought a house. I bought a bunch of guns. I've invested in technology for you guys, and I've done a lot of great things. I paid off my car. I was able to do all of that because I didn't have to pay my student loans. Now, if that money now gets removed from my monthly budget and I have to pay my student loans again, it's not going to hurt me. Like, it's going to be painful, but it's not going to like collapse my financial situation. It's just going to be merely annoying. However, there are some people who were at a lower income level than me, and that extra money was very useful for them. They were able to use it to pay for their rent. They were able to use it to pay for gas and eggs and milk and all kinds of things. And as that was extra money in their pocket, but as inflation ate away all of that extra budget, probably a lot of people now, all the extra money that they're not paying their student loans because of the pause is probably almost entirely consumed by base necessities due to the inflation. So when these kick back on in January, you're probably going to see a lot of people wailing and mashing their teeth and screaming because of Joe Biden's inflation, which has been largely hidden by the fact that the student loans are paused. As soon as Joe Biden unpauses those loans, a lot of that inflation, to the extent that it's still been hurting people, it's going to hurt them even more now, especially if they have student loans, which is going to just lead to more people baying at the Democrats to, won't you relieve our loans? You did 10,000 once. Can't you do 10,000 again? Maybe you should do 50,000 this time. Maybe you should just wipe them all out. What this has done is it took the frogs out of the slowly boiling pot of their student loans, and it just put them on the counter for 3 years while Joe Biden just put as much flame under that broiler as he possibly could, got that water just broiling. It's just steam now. And now in January, they're about to toss that frog back into that steam den. And, you're going to see a lot of bang for Democrat politics come January. You definitely are.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong. They just said in the article that this inflationary action is not going to cause inflation because they're going to at the same time stop doing this other inflationary action that was worse.
Yeah. So basically, pausing student loan payments helped increase inflation because it meant again, like me, I bought a house. I paid off my car. I bought guns. I bought ammo. I bought a computer. I bought other things for my house. I spent a lot of money, probably something like 20. I bought a lot of crypto. I spent probably like $20,000 over the last 3 years that I would have otherwise not had. And all of that is me. I'm out there buying eggs that maybe you want to buy those eggs. Well, you can't because I just bid the price up from 99 cents to $2.99. And I've got extra money to buy eggs because I'm not paying on my student loans. So that drives inflation. I went and bought a house. So maybe you wanted to buy a house too. And now all of a sudden the houses are more expensive because I'm out there buying a house that I otherwise couldn't afford because my student loans are paused. Maybe you wanted to go buy guns. Well, you can't because, BLM. That one's not my fault. I don't take responsibility for that. But yes, based off of my economic activity, I definitely was buying more things than what I otherwise would have, which definitely drives inflation, especially at a time when there was not enough supply of things. So yes, that the student loan pause definitely drives inflation. So ending that should stop driving inflation as much. However, if you're going to replace it with another program like debt forgiveness that will then again drive inflation, well, we're back at the same spot that we were. So it doesn't really do much for it. But as we know, inflation's not really a problem, right?
Hey, yes, sorry, my wife was talking to me. I just want to go back to one thing. So, them stopping an inflationary action and then starting another one is not them not causing inflation. It's just them shifting how they're doing it. But with the added benefit, I say sarcastically, that the first inflationary action of stopping payments, followed by the inflationary action of canceling out $10,000 to $20,000 in loans, actually, as you described very well, amplifies the inflationary action of the first one. Even though you're stopped doing it, the situation it created is amplified and is going to cause not only inflation but also destructions of people's like livelihood, like their budgets. It is so much worse than just having forgiven the loans in the first place. Sorry, what was your question?
I don't know that I had a question. I just think let's see. So this was funny part two. So also from this Goldman Sachs economist, the forgiveness will likely boost the deficit substantially by an amount roughly equal to the amount of student debt forgiven. But economists don't expect much of an impact from that either. In a separate note on Thursday, Bank of America came to roughly the same conclusion, saying, quote, the estimated increase in deficit over the next 10 years is of a similar magnitude to the estimated decrease from the Inflation Reduction Act, also only marginal, meaning the course of inflation would likely not be impacted. So basically, the Inflation Reduction Act, all of the like very small amount of inflation that the Inflation Reduction Act was theoretically supposed to provide, is completely eaten up by the student loan forgiveness.
And the current track of inflation is like exponential right now.
Yeah.
So saying it's going to stay on the same track isn't a good thing.
Yeah. So, well, you know. Alrighty. So, what authorizes Joe Biden to do this?
I asked that question earlier.
Apparently, it's the HEROES Act.
You're my hero.
I am your hero. I don't want to say that you're my hero because then you'll be sad.
Yes.
Don't call Dyer a hero. He's just a man doing his job. All right. So the AP has this very nice short summary of the HEROES Act and how it theoretically authorizes Joe Biden to do this. Now, a funny thing while I was researching this is that Google got confused and thought I meant the HEROES Act of like 2020, which was a COVID, like it was like the second or third COVID relief plan. And I don't know if that went past or not, but it's just funny to me that Congress will just, they've used the word heroes as the name of legislation twice, like once every decade, apparently. I think that they thought that we would have forgot, and we may have forgotten, except for Joe Biden now has made it the old HEROES Act relevant again. So there's actually two HEROES Acts. so many heroes in Congress. Alrighty, so the HEROES Act of 2003. Let's see here. So the AP's summary here is that the Biden administration is trying its authority to cancel, which this is actually a little bit, I don't know, a little bit spooky here because Joe Biden just announced that this was happening. And then a lot of the reporting on it has been, you know, they're attempting to. They're seeing if this will work, which implies to me that there's a possibility that after that they've announced this and people will be making decisions reliant on this announcement, that something will happen causing it to not happen, which will also be interesting. I wonder what will happen when 43 million people who were expecting $10,000 from Joe don't get $10,000 from Joe. I'm guessing it's going to make January 6th look like a barbecue. like a Joe Biden 4th of July barbecue without hot dog buns.
I don't know. There's nothing he can really do right now that's not going to piss a bunch of people off. Yeah.
Let's hear. So they are trying its authority to cancel student debt to the coronavirus pandemic, and it's here, and a 2003 law aimed at providing help to members of the military. See, I'm apparently equivalent to a member of the military now. Legal challenges are expected. That's always good. Skeptics of if you're the president and you have to ask whether or not you're doing something, whether or not it's legal for you to do that, It's probably not. Skeptics of the administration's ability to act on its own without new legislation had once included President Joe Biden himself and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. But in a legal opinion released on Wednesday, the Justice Department said that the HEROES Act of 2003 gives the administration, quote, sweeping authority to reduce or eliminate student debt during a national emergency when significant actions with potentially far-reaching consequences are often required.
What's the emergency?
COVID, Dyer. COVID's
Right now.
emergency. Yes.
COVID is an emergency we're currently suffering through right now.
Yes.
No.
Oh. I think it would have been better for Biden just to lean into it and say, well, the emergency is the unprecedented inflation caused by my policies. That I could have stood behind. Let's see here. So AP continues. The law was adopted with overwhelming bipartisan support at a time when U.S. forces were fighting 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It gives the Education Secretary authority to waive rules relating to student financial aid programs in times of war or national emergency. Now, I don't know exactly what the history of this, the usage of this was back in 2003 and 4 and 5, but my guess is that I would imagine there was some kind of program that this HEROES Act authorized that would say, for instance, if you were in college for a year or two and you suddenly felt the patriotism flowing through you and you enlisted to go fight in Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever, we'll forgive your debt. We'll because this is a time of war. If you enlist, we'll forgive your debt, even though you had agreed to pay it. That's what my guess is.
One of the programs that was available when I first joined that they try to sell you on was that they would freeze interest on my loan if I had one, and they would lock in my payments at a very low rate.
Yeah. So, and where we had a time of war, kind of, yes, sort of, but it was much more fresh in 2003, and there was a big demand for troops, and we weren't really sure where it was going to go. But yeah, I mean, that's been a theme of things the government has done for the military for a long time. Is there's a lot of college programs to get free or reduced college, to get your college paid for if you're a veteran or if you're enlisted. There's a lot of stuff around that, and I think a lot of people agree that that's probably perfectly acceptable. However, they are now stretching this thing, which was meant for Dyer, into people like me who. I don't need it. Thank you, though, I guess. Let's see here. So the law was adopted with overwhelming bipartisan support at a time when U.S. forces were fighting 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It gives the Education Secretary authority to waive rules relating to student financial aid programs in times of war or national emergency. Former President Donald Trump declared a national emergency in 2020 because of the pandemic, and it remains in effect. But neither Trump nor Biden, until the president's announcement on Wednesday, had tried to wipe out so much student debt at one time. Yeah, offering Dyer, freezing interest on $10,000 is a big difference.
Yeah,
than just wiping out $400 billion with the stroke of a pen.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah. Triumvirate he's over on Rumble. He's asking, didn't the Biden administration literally just argue a few months ago that COVID isn't an emergency, which is why they are allowing 3 billion illegals to cross the border? Yes, they did, and that is the next segment we have here.
Also argued that Trump, even though he declared an emergency, that he didn't allow him to divert emergency funds for border security.
It did not. Here's Jean Carey talking about that.
I want to ask about the legal basis for canceling student debt. The HEROES Act hinges on student debt cancellation being tied to the pandemic and that being a national emergency. But the administration argued in court that the pandemic is over at the southern border to lift Title 42. It's so over that the government's going to stop buying vaccines in the fall and shift to the private sector. So how is this a national emergency? How's COVID a national emergency when it comes to student debt?
So it's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it. Look, we use the HEROES Act because there are going to be some people, when we lift the pause, that's still going to suffer. They're still going to have a little bit of a hard time. And so that's one of the reasons that we made this decision.
Yeah, so basically it's an emergency because when they lift the pause, some people aren't going to like that. Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, like, I'm not going to like it. I won't be able to buy as many guns or as many houses or as many things for my house. But it's just, it is what it is. You got to pay it back. You took it out. You got to pay it back. I did not get a feminist dance theory degree, and my ability to dance proves that. And I did get a good job with a degree that was in STEM. And so I'm not having any problems with paying mine off because I went to college for what it was for and got a degree and am doing things in that degree. Not everybody does that. But I don't know.
I think the university should have to pay back all the students for the wasted time and degrees that were worthless that they received from them.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been one way to pay.
Seems predatory to me.
That would have been one way to pay for this is to change the taxable status, the tax exempt status of public universities, and private universities, and to get some money out of their donation pool, which many universities like Harvard, for instance, has something like $40 billion in their endowment fund, which is donations, and they are able to keep that $40 billion in a tax-free pool. They don't have to pay money when they receive it. They can use it for investments and all kinds of crazy things, and they don't have to pay any taxes on that either. I mean, that's $40 billion is like a small country or a medium country even. That's a lot. And every Ivy League university has that. And maybe we should be looking into that. Maybe if 100,000 Harvard students, or maybe 40,000 Harvard students all got $10,000, maybe that needs to come out of Harvard. Maybe Harvard needs to get a tax bill for 40,000 times 10,000. Maybe that's a way we could do it. Is if you are still struggling with your debt and you're not able to pay it off, and we can see via your income that you're not going to be able to pay this off, or you're underwater, etc. Then maybe we track back to whichever university you took out that loan for. Maybe we go after them.
The fact that the federal government is involved in funding universities in the first place is kind of not included in the Constitution. It seems like if you want to be funding them at all, that should be a state's thing, because that's not listed as one of the areas of responsibility of the federal government, and it's just one of many examples of the federal government becoming all-encompassing. This massive bureaucracy that is involved in far too many things, and because they're involved, they create these perverse incentives that just cause problems.
Well, and a lot of people with college degrees, a decent chunk of them end up in government positions. They end up as government employees, and so they continue to perpetuate the system that helped them out. That's how this works. So the response from both sides to this announcement on Wednesday has been interesting. The GOP pretty roundly condemned it, which is predictable, saying that it was government overspend, government overreach, and that it would negatively impact inflation. There was probably a lot of interesting and funny zingers and one-liners on Twitter from various GOP reps, but in general, the response was, it's pretty boring. It's pretty predictable. I could have predicted that they would have said all those things, years ago. The Democrats, on the other hand, were a little bit more interesting, a little bit more unpredictable. They have a very fragmented response to it. This was obviously a very popular move among young Democrats who make up a large number of college debt holders. And it's likely that they'll be the ones benefiting directly from this policy. But other Democrat cohorts were very upset about the plan for various reasons. Some said that it doesn't go far enough. Others said that it was targeting the wrong people, mainly white rich people, and that it wasn't fair. The it wasn't fair is something that is shared by the GOP, who keep referencing people who've already paid off their student loan debt, and saying, what do they get? There's the famous clip from the 2020 election where, who was it? Elizabeth Warren, a father comes up to her and asks, I already paid off my kid's debt. What money do I get? And Elizabeth Warren says none, and laughs at him, because he's an idiot and paid for his debt. I could have been paying on my student loans over the last couple of years, but I didn't, because I knew that this was probably going to happen. I've clearly not been advocating for it. I've been doing this show, advocating against it. I didn't vote for it. I don't want it to happen because I think overall it's going to be worse for my future. However, just because you don't want something to happen, just because you're not advocating for something to happen, it doesn't benefit you to not live in reality. And I live in reality, and I think it was a much better decision for me overall to instead of, I don't know, I guess resting on this. I don't even know if I'd call it a principled stance, but I bought a house. I bought a bunch of guns. I bought some investments. I think overall I'm going to be doing better for myself and better for the movement in the future. It's more, I would say, and this is for all of you as well. If you're a conservative, if you're on the right, if you want to try to get the country back, it makes no sense to hobble yourself financially just for principles. Principles that are barely articulable. It's much better for the movement, much better for you, your family, your community long term if you are financially stable. And if, for whatever reason, the Democrats find you and give you $10,000, you should take it. That's my opinion. Maybe Dyer's got a different opinion on that.
So it is not unprincipled. It is unprincipled for you to create the program, to vote for or institute the program. It is not unprincipled for you, as someone who's not involved in passing it, to accept the benefit of said program, because if you don't, you're giving the advantage to others, not yourself, and weakening your position. So it doesn't make sense for you to, when the Democrats have set up a system where the economy is crashing and people are barely getting by, and they throw a bone to help out a little bit with the economic damage they've caused. If you don't accept that, you're just making it so you're less likely to get by. So no, it is not unprincipled to accept the benefit, so you don't their actions are mitigated, right?
Yep. So again, in full transparency, I will be personally receiving, in theory, $10,000 of my debt slashed, which does not really put a big dent in what I owe. However, just full transparency, and the transparency on the other side of it is I paid approximately 20 to 25 grand in income tax last year. So, on net, yes, I received some stuff, but I'm still a net contributor. And a lot of people who are going to end up getting this are not net contributors. If you are a net contributor, you should not feel bad about getting up to whatever you contributed back from the government, whether it comes through COVID relief money, college debt forgiveness, whatever it is. You shouldn't feel bad about it. I don't believe in taxes. I think the income tax is unconstitutional. I think that we could support a lot of clearly look at what the government's doing with the money. We're paying for 2 million illegals per year to come over here. We flew 100,000 Afghans here last year. We are running the FBI so that the Democrat Party has a militant wing. We're also supporting BLM and all that stuff with all that money. I don't think that the government needs my money, and so if the government's going to find some way of giving back my money that I paid into it, I'm not gonna feel too bad about it.
So you actually mentioned earlier that we possibly should have gotten COVID relief for Direwolf Media. I actually didn't, and because I felt that it was too much possibility that we're giving IRS another ability to find fault.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, it was a trap. It will be a trap.
And right now, with the 80,000 plus new agents and the funding of the IRS, right now they're ramping up investigations into improper or fraudulent COVID release applications.
Which is interesting. That raises an interesting question about, will there be taxes if you receive $10,000 or $20,000 from the government in debt relief? Is that taxable income? It's an interesting question, and at least a few states have already shown that they probably have laws that would include this as taxable state tax.
Yep.
And so there are, one of the states was something like $1,100 of additional taxes if you receive the $10,000, which is interesting because when I get my debt slashed down, I'm not going to receive a $10,000 check that I can then decide, oh, I'm going to put $9,000 into my loan and I'll save $10,000 for the taxes when they come. No, it's just going to go directly into the loan. I won't even be able to touch it at all. And so it'll be $10,000 off my loan. However, I will potentially have to pay an extra $1,000 in taxes at the end of the year that maybe I don't have. Maybe I don't have an extra $1,000 lying around to pay in taxes. So that's gonna be real interesting. And then we don't know if this is going to affect federal income. For instance, you guys probably are familiar with this if you have done or had somebody do your taxes for you in front of you. If you received COVID stimulus money, if you received a COVID stimulus check, you had to declare that as taxable income on your federal income taxes. So will this then be taxed at federal income level? What you could see is people getting $10,000 of their debt reduced. However, on the flip side of it, between their state, local, and federal taxes, they could be paying something like $3,000. Like real, like a actual, like you need to write a check for an extra $3,000 to various governments. And
this could be people who already have no money because of inflation and the economy.
This will be a very interesting disaster come next year, because this payment is probably likely not going to happen until the next calendar year, and so probably in 2024. Yes, when you're filing your taxes in 2024 for the year of 2023. There will be some interesting things happening. People will be getting some interesting news for their tax returns. But that's sufficiently far away that no one's got to worry about it, right? Do you think Joe Biden's going to get reelected in 2024 when in April, 6 months prior to the election, a bunch of people have to pay an extra $3,000 to the government because of his tax or his forgiveness thing? Do you think that's going to happen?
The irony is that he's done something that he's claiming is to reduce the financial burden on people, but what he's done is actually make it far worse.
Yes. All right. Alrighty. That's. Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure that the 87,000 armed IRS agents will come help you figure out your taxes, though. So don't worry.
I think anyone who actually filed for the COVID release money, they fell for a trap that now the IRS, we know, is weaponized by the Democrats to go after their political adversaries. I think they've given them a avenue to harass you. Or even jail you. They're talking about putting people in jail for 17 years for filing incorrectly.
I don't even think you get that much for like visiting Epstein. Like,
well, see, they count every single little inaccuracy within the document as a separate crime of wire fraud.
You know, I mean, it might be cheaper just to have an IRS agent just take you out back, like old Yeller.
Yeah. So they're taking people right now who so those mistakes could be those errors on the filings could be mistakes, right?
Yeah,
they could be unintentional. They could be because you're not following the process properly completely, but you still had good intentions, or you just didn't know what you're doing. But now they can put you in jail.
Yeah. So basically, this entire problem is caused by having too many gender studies degrees. And another country, which also had some problems due to, well, too many gender studies degrees, was Afghanistan, which is our next story. So it is the anniversary of... Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. My audio went weird. I just want to make sure you're still there. Alrighty. So it's the 1-year anniversary of Joe Biden's failed pullout of Afghanistan, and it's now pregnant with terrorists and American weapons in terrorist hands. In just the 18 short months, gosh, they've felt like an eternity, that we've had Joe Biden in office, the amount of damage that he has done to American dominance abroad and Western stability in general is just unbelievable. Just to name a few things since Joe Biden took office, Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia basically destroyed energy stability in all of Europe. The Taliban took complete control of Afghanistan. The Chinese have just been extremely aggressive in multiple theaters worldwide. Relations with North Korea have been completely cut off. Joe Biden has stooped to having to beg the Saudis, the ones that financed 9/11, for oil, and also
and they shrugged him off.
They did. And then also they begged. We've had to beg Venezuelan dictators for oil, just to name a few things. That's by no means an inclusive list. You can read that next part there, Dyer.
Okay, so just a quick trip down memory lane. The withdrawal from Kabul was quite the disaster, starting with the abandonment of Bagram Air Base, a secure, fortified location in favor for the Kabul International Airport for the evacuation. That is an insane move that the military leaders on the ground said, no, this is a really bad idea. And I don't think you need to be a military strategist to see that a airport in the middle of a gigantic city full of people that might be combatants, and even if they aren't combatants, are going to be spooked and might want to try to use your planes to get out. That's the worst place you could pick. If you're trying to engineer chaos, you pick the airport in Kabul. If you're trying to get out safely, you go with Bagram Air Force Base.
And there was a lot of discussion as to why did they decide to close Bagram. Now, there's been some reverse engineering of reasons why by Mark Milley and Lloyd Austin to try to, avoid execution for treason. There was also a theory at the time that Joe Biden may have just misspoke as to which base he wanted to close. Now that might sound ridiculous. The theory years ago was, maybe Joe Biden is just fumbling Joe, and he's just, he's sleeping in these meetings, and he's just saying random things. We have several examples of him referencing the wrong country while at diplomatic events, at one point even suggesting that we were going to give a whole country to Russia. So it's entirely plausible that he misspoke, but the thought was, well, there's adults in the room. There's people there to back up Joe when he misspeaks, close Bagram. All right, well, Joe really meant, close Kabul. So we'll keep Bagram open, and we'll close that international airport.
Kabul wasn't even a base. Don't close Kabul. It's an airport.
That'd just be silly. And what we really found out during the Afghanistan withdrawal is that there is no adults at the table. There is nobody there when Joe Biden misspeaks to back him up. So did Joe Biden accidentally say close Bagram Air Base when he didn't mean that? Well, we'll never know. However, if he did accidentally say that, it's very clear that nobody would have countermanded that and kept it open. It's very clear that would not have happened. So it's, again, a little bit, maybe it's a wild conspiracy, although, we've got 12 more months of seeing Joe. Is it that wild of a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden accidentally closed Bagram and that Lloyd is just an idiot or malicious enough to just follow through with it, even though he may have known that that's not what Joe Biden meant, or known that that was a bad idea and that they shouldn't do it? It's possible.
Okay, so we had what's his face? Not Lloyd, but Milley threatening to during Trump to resign over Trump's actions, right? But he didn't actually resign or put his position on the line when he was told to do something he must have known or should have known was insanely stupid and dangerous and would most likely lead to the loss of American lives.
Yeah, and it did. Is it Stephen or is it Stuart Scheller? Is that the Marine that spoke up? I can't remember his name.
It wasn't Stephen.
What was his name? Was it Stuart?
Let me look it up.
I feel like it was Stuart. I can't remember. While Dyer's looking that up, so there is also the point that the entire reason that we were evacuating was because there was this desire.
Stuart.
Was it Stuart? Was it Stuart Schaefer or Scheller?
Scheller.
Stuart Scheller. Yeah, so Marine Stuart Scheller, 17 years in the force. He spoke out and said, hey, this was obviously a bad idea. People died. Why is none of our command structure taking responsibility for this? Why is everybody just, continuing through as if this wasn't a bad call when it was clearly a bad call? And then he got fired for that. He got discharged for that. He was the only armed forces serviceman to be discharged for the events in Kabul, even though
not only did they fire him, they said, "Hey, we can not fire you or reduce your punishment if you just tell people that you were wrong. The people did everything right. There wasn't a what are you talking about? Bad call. That didn't happen." Yeah. They wanted him to recant what he'd said, and that tells you a lot, right? They're so worried about the truth getting out about their failure that they're willing to.
It's not the 1980. I mean, that's the 1984 model. It's not enough to just not say things that are wrong. You have to believe them and shout them from the rooftops as well. So,
yeah.
Let's hear. So again, just the idea that they need to have an airport or airbase open for evacuation at all of anybody that's not U.S. forces that's completely ridiculous on the face of it. Because what they really needed was that they needed a place to evacuate the Afghan government officials who were so good at their job that the country fell in a matter of 3 weeks to the Taliban. The people of Afghanistan were not rewarded by the failure of their government officials, so why should the government officials have been rewarded by getting a escape to America ticket for free? That seems pretty ridiculous. They should have gotten to go down with the ship that they helped manage. And as we talked about at the time last year when we were talking about this, as recently as several weeks before the fall of Afghanistan, there was this big puff piece about the gender studies program at the Afghanistan University, about how they had all this liberal stuff going on there, and it was so great and wonderful that they were able to do these things. And it just begs the question as to how good of fighters were these gender studies majors when they needed to resist a hostile takeover of their country? And I think the answer to that was not very well.
I think part of the problem was we employed a lot of the terrorist members that we should have been, were fighting against as members of the Afghan military.
Well, and those were just the ones that weren't high on hashish all day.
Right. So are we here?
Yes.
Okay, so during the evacuation, 13 slain service members, obviously 13 service members were killed when a suicide bomb went off at the gate of the unsecured Kabul airport, which was obviously a gigantic soft target with easy access, with a bunch of civilians coming straight up to the soldiers and trying to climb the fence, and there's no way to separate themselves from possible targets or separate targets from or threats from civilians.
Here's a
defensive position.
Here's a quick rule of thumb: all the Afghanis are potentially problems.
However, because you can't just start mowing them down,
and again, this goes to my previous point of it was ridiculous that we were going to be evacuating any of them at all. I mean, that was ridiculous.
Yes,
on the face.
So
every decision made after that point will also be ridiculous.
This event so touched the leftists of this nation that NPR released an article 2 days ago where they incorrectly reported the branch membership of the slain service members.
Two days ago from today. So they had a full 12 months to know the identity of these 13 killed servicemen and know what branch they came from. It was 11 Marines, 1 Navy sailor, and 1 Army soldier.
Yes. So they couldn't even do the basic research on the topic.
Yeah. Thank you, NPR. Great job. True news. NewsGuard certified. 100 out of 100. In response to the bombing that killed these 13 servicemen, Joe Biden authorized a drone strike on an aid worker who was transporting water, and also the aid worker's 10 children.
And bragged about it, like, oh, we got him.
Yeah.
Got revenge. He did a press release where he was going and touting this as being, oh, we got the guys who bombed us.
Yes. No evidence of bomb-making equipment was ever linked to the targets that were killed in this drone strike. This, of course, demonstrated the, quote, over-the-horizon capability that Lloyd Austin and Comrade Mark Milley assured us would make up for the loss of our bases in Afghanistan. Don't worry, we don't need to have presence in Afghanistan. We have over-the-horizon capabilities that allow us to pinpoint accurately strike missiles onto the families of aid workers. Trying to bring water to people.
Paradoxically, they actually had a drone following this guy for long enough to know he wasn't the bomber.
Yes, for like 8 to 10 hours beforehand.
And so they know he definitely had nothing to do with the bomb. And also, now this is something they may not have known in the moment, but with reviewing the drone footage, it was extremely clear what was in the vehicle and that he had nothing dangerous, even though he never came within, like, he never transported a bomb or what, so they thought there might be another attack, right? They thought the car was going to be a bomb attack, but they know that he never picked up bomb materials. They know he's an aid worker. They've been following him for a long time, and he wasn't at the approaching the airport to run the fence, right? So they knew well enough he wasn't a threat, and they chose a moment where he stopped, surrounded by kids, to bomb him.
Yeah. Well, and then there was, I mean, the car wouldn't have blown up. The explosion wouldn't have been that big unless there was bombs in there. It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, what do you expect when you hit a car with a Sidewinder? It's going to explode.
Well, it wasn't that big of an explosion. That's actually one of the clues.
But they said it was, Dyer.
Well, was it Milley that actually said that?
There was reports at the time, like when this was like happening, that the explosion of the car could only have been that big if there were secondary explosions from other bomb making.
But then the actual video was released, and it wasn't a big secondary explosion.
Yeah, awkward, very awkward.
Okay, so
so after the withdrawal was complete. Over 100,000 unvetted Afghan nationals were brought to America and deposited at various military bases around the country, where these Afghan refugees were allowed to run amok in secure locations, and some of them would go on to rape American citizens. True story. We also had several instances, one in particular, where the Air Force pilots decided that after their C-17 had been commandeered by several hundred Afghan nationals, that it was a good idea to take off and land at another secure American location, which is borderline unprecedented and worthy of court-martial. However, these pilots who, after having their vehicle commandeered and then flying their pirates to another secure location, they were, instead of being discharged dishonorably, they were given commendations, and I believe that they were publicly honored.
Yes, they were.
Which was rather ridiculous. I fail to see how allowing, you're supposed to defend your boat, your ship, your plane to like the death, I think, or ensure that it's disabled before you retreat from it. Surely it is not Air Force protocol to allow your vehicle to be commandeered and then fly to the location that the commandeerers would like you to fly to, especially if that place is another secure American base. That's rather ridiculous. So
they ran the massive risk of, once they were in the air, that this large crowd that very much outnumbered them could have tried to take the plane, either crash it and kill everyone on board, or use it as a weapon against other people.
Yeah. So there was a lot of bad things done by the people there that were not good for America. And because things that are not good for America are good for the Democrat Party, those people were commendations? Yes, accommodations.
Yeah. We also abandoned several dozen military working dogs to die of dehydration in cages. And then we got to watch the Taliban propaganda as they rescue the dogs to make fun of us.
Yeah. The Taliban, famously, Muslims in general, hate dogs. It is like, for some reason, they just like despise dogs. They love raping children and they despise dogs. I mean, like, I think it's pretty easy to like determine the character and the worth of certain ideologies based on how they feel about children and dogs.
Yeah.
But even with their hate, their absolute vitriol against dogs, the Taliban still thought it, and it was on their part, it was a great propaganda piece to go rescue the dogs that we left behind. Again, we took 100,000 unvetted Afghan nationals, some of them even commandeering our aircraft to get there. And we still couldn't find room for something that was like maybe 20 dogs. Maybe.
I would have preferred the aircraft be full of military working dogs and none of the citizens.
I would have preferred an entire C-17 per working dog and no one else. That's all we need. The dogs deserve the whole aircraft to
let the
fat,
dogs
sure,
fly the plane. Even I don't care.
Yes. And yeah, that was just one of the numerous major propaganda victories that the Taliban had in making us look like absolute fools over there. And we did act like absolute fools over there due to the orders of my opinion only, due to the orders of our military leadership, if you could even call it that, who ordered the men below them to act like fools, and they did. And the Taliban runs Afghanistan now. How great for them.
Yep.
So it's not just the dogs, although maybe Lloyd Austin is a dog. It's not just the dogs. It's estimated that Lloyd Austin, who, important context here, was on the board of defense company Raytheon 10 months prior to his decision. Again, so 10 months before we withdraw from withdraw from Afghanistan, 10 months before that, Lloyd Austin is sitting in a boardroom on the board of Raytheon. Okay, so Raytheon sells military equipment. So Lloyd Austin, sitting on the board of Raytheon, leaves Raytheon to become the Secretary of Defense. 10 months later, makes the decision to abandon $90 billion of military hardware to the Taliban. This wasn't just bombed out Humvees, it was fully functional Humvees and rifles and ammo and APC uniforms. Actually, it was, there was a bunch of footage coming out of Afghanistan in the days following the withdrawal completion of what looked like American soldiers, because it was Taliban dressed in the full APC camo uniform, wearing, again, U.S. issued M16s in American military Humvees, riding around shooting at their citizens. I mean, it looked like, and this was a big problem too, is we basically gave them the ability to create these extremely high fidelity propaganda pieces where they can now false flag American forces going around committing terrorist acts because they literally have our flag and our uniforms and our guns and our vehicles and all that stuff.
They can attack any other country and say it was America.
They could. We also left them nearly every model of helicopter that we've produced in the last 20 years. Wonderful.
Some estimates say that the Taliban now has the third largest air force in the world.
Not a joke, guys. Not a joke.
It's a really sad stat, actually.
Yes. It would be interesting to know more about that unprecedented transfer of weaponry to the Taliban by Joe Biden and Lloyd Austin. That's why many this week were waiting for the State Department's annual report of global weapons sales and transfers. They release a report every year for the last almost 40 years that details global arms sales and transfers through either thefts or regime changes or whatever. Whatever happens, they release a statistics and lists of who got what weapons where, so that just people can know. So according to state.gov, the report, the World Military Expenditures and Arms Transfers, also called WMEAT, or WMEAT, 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 that just sounds weird. So the World Military Expenditures and Arms Transfers is a series of reports that was designed to be a convenient reference on annual military expenditures, arms transfers, armed forces, and selected economic data and relative indicators consisting of pertinent military economic ratios. The aim is to provide the arms control and international security community with useful, comprehensive, and accurate data accompanied by analysis and highlights. From its inception in 1960 until 1999, WMEAT was prepared and published by the U.S. Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, which was absorbed by the Department of State in 1999. Starting with WMEAT 2005, WMEAT is published online only, not in hard copy. So that was from state.gov. I got that description describing what this World Military Expenditures and Arms Transfer Report was. Now, wouldn't that be interesting to see after Lloyd Austin gave $90 billion of American hardware to the Taliban? Wouldn't that be an interesting report this year? Just wouldn't it? So what did this report have to say about that transfer? Well, this year. Well, not much, because, well, this year, the first year ever, first year in a very long time, we didn't release that report.
Really?
Oh,
For what reason would this year be the year they want to stop doing
well,
that?
in lieu of releasing the WMEAT 2022, the State Department released this press release instead, which actually I'll pull up on the screen here so you know I'm not joshing you around. Alrighty. Oh, thanks. So the State Department, this is from August 18th, 2022, so just last week. Department of State announces publication of 38th and final edition of World Military Expenditures and Arms Transfers, WMEAT. In 2021, World Military Expenditures and Arms Transfers, which the Department of State published in December of 2021, is the final edition of WMEAT. Section whatever of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022 repealed the 1994 statutory provision that required the Department of State to publish an edition of WMEAT every year. Consistent with this repeal, the Department of State will cease to produce and publish WMEAT. Copies of all editions of WMEAT dating from 1974 to 2021 remain publicly accessible as Adobe PDF or Excel spreadsheet documents on the WMEAT page on State Department's website. So, why are they no longer providing this report? Well, the National Defense Authorization Act repealed it. Well, what does that got to do with National Defense Authorization Act? Not a whole lot, because that's typically... Well, Dyer, you want to tell us what the National Defense Authorization Act is?
Yeah, so the act is basically authorizing the funding of the military branches and also some of the other letter agencies' activities. So the buying of weapons, missiles, tanks, the paying of soldiers, sailors, and airmen. All our activities. The Pentagon collects their wish list of things that they want to fund to support operations, training, and the maintaining of forces.
So
and
it's about giving you guys money.
Yes,
right.
Basically.
So what's interesting here is that it would appear that if Congress was able to repeal the thing that forces the State Department to issue this report, it sounds like at some point Congress passed a law saying, hey, we would like additional transparency, not just for ourselves, but also for the citizens of the United States. And so we're ordering the executive branch, which is where the military and the State Department lie, not the legislative branch. The legislative branch is thus ordering the executive branch to present this report to Congress and to the citizens of the United States for transparency purposes. And then it would appear that in the most recent National Defense Authorization Act, Congress has thus ordered the executive branch to be less transparent.
What would be the reason for them to choose to be less transparent in this year?
Dyer, were you not paying attention earlier? I said Lloyd Austin, who used to be on the board of Raytheon, gave $90 billion of military equipment to the Taliban.
Oh, so that might be embarrassing if they were to, have that seen in the records of expenditures.
Yeah, you might not want to be super transparent about where that $90 billion of equipment
What about
went.
also about the massive amount of weapons and equipment that's gone to Ukraine.
Now, it's interesting because we made such a big deal about giving $90 billion of military equipment to a country, especially a terrorist country, last year. And in the last 12 months, we've given something like $80 billion to Ukraine. And I think we're on track for something like $120 billion over like the next 2 years to Ukraine based off of current promises and outlays. So, yeah, we, Lloyd Austin's just doing the Lord's work for Raytheon there. He's doing
I'm
a great
willing
job.
to bet we've given more that isn't on the books as well.
Yeah, well, we definitely gave them at least $1 billion because, if we didn't give them $1 billion, then, prosecutors were going to go after Hunter. So we know at least $1 billion.
For that, it was also for defense, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So basically, over the last 18 months of Joe Biden, it's just been disaster doesn't really capture the amount of degradation that America's power and influence abroad has had. Now, we've yet to really see the effects or see that tested, right? So America's power abroad has been severely diminished, and Western stability globally has been severely diminished. However, due to the instability caused by COVID, we've not really noticed the instability that Joe Biden has caused just with global security. So, for instance, for Europe, well, right now they're facing massive instability with energy due to Joe Biden's weakness in policies. I don't know that I need to really justify that. I think I have in previous sections and shows, but let's give me the benefit of the doubt here for a second. So, Europe facing unprecedented energy instability because of Joe Biden. Well, that's after they were facing 2 years of instability just due to COVID. So they're not really noticing or attributing it to Joe in a meaningful way. Right now, just America's global military influence, especially in the Middle East, clearly in the Chinese regions, severely diminished. Well, we haven't really had that tested yet. Afghanistan and the Taliban, they've not launched a military attack against the U.S. yet. So it doesn't matter if we had a lot of defense over there or not a lot of defense. It's not been tested yet. When it does get tested, well, I think you're going to find out that what I just said is absolutely correct. Our capacity has been severely diminished. Same thing, South China Sea, and everything around China is that we're going to see, well, we should feel lucky that we've not been tested in that yet, because if we do get tested, well, we might find that we've come up missing, largely due to things that Joe Biden has done directly. And I just think that because we haven't seen the negative ramifications of that, we haven't seen Chinese soldiers on your street corner looking for your papers. You haven't frozen to death in winter yet because it's still summer. Same thing for Europe. I think that the level of degradation directly attributable to Joe Biden just hasn't been felt yet. But when it does get felt, well, people may literally die.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are already writhing over what they can feel right now, and this is just the beginning of the iceberg. Like we've said before, the consequences of the actions being taken in this last year are going to have long-lasting and accelerating effects.
You know how like government offices and like military buildings, they always have like these like really cool professional shots of like their planes flying and doing stuff.
Yep.
And do you think that this picture that's up on the screen, do you think that's gonna make it into like a boardroom somewhere?
No, I don't.
Oh, I think it should.
People got ran over as well.
Yeah. We also, forgot to mention the people who rode in the wheel well that fell out at like 20,000 feet. That was fun. Alrighty.
I mean, they should have been on the plane in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't have been. Alrighty. So our next story here, which we'll run through. I think we'll be pretty quick here. I think on the last two stories.
Yep.
Or do we have three? No, we've got two stories. Okay, we'll go quick. Okay, so Zuckerberg, what did he do, Dyer? He did a thing.
So
what did he do?
He admitted that Facebook censored stories, which we already knew they'd do this, right?
Oh my goodness! What a revelation!
Yeah, but he admitted it. Where before they had said they hadn't been doing that, right? And before Congress, so he might have some liability here. So including the Hunter Biden laptop, and not only did he admit that Facebook had intentionally censored it, but he also said that the FBI had highly encouraged them to do so. Well, we got a clip here for you to watch.
Okay.
Massive news today.
That I think basically came to us. Some folks on our team. It was okay.
I think
just so you
where they said FBI.
Have a listen.
Is the FBI? I think basically came to us. Some folks on our team. It was like, hey. Just so you know, like you should be on high alert. There was we thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. Fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely.
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful.
So for context. That big dump they were referring to was the Hunter Biden story. So they said, prepping them, hey, there's about to be a big dump.
And how would the FBI know that dump was coming? Is it because the FBI had the Hunter Biden laptop for like up to a year before the story finally came out?
Yeah, so the FBI had Hunter's laptop since December of 2019, and they knew very well that the laptop was legitimate. They knew very well that it was not Russian disinformation, and they were telling Facebook, the leadership, that it was Russian disinformation as the excuse for why they should censor the truth.
Well, I mean, but Dyer, I mean, that's probably the only time that they've ever done that, right? I mean, like Facebook's probably never censored anything else before.
I don't know. So those same censors, those same authoritative sources, that said that the Hunter Biden story wasn't true and that was Russian disinformation. They've also said a lot of things were false. That was talked about on Facebook and those things turned out to be true. There's stories about the Russian Trump collusion. They censored any people saying that was fake, but that was true.
Now, there's a well-known NSA program, and it's well-known because Snowden leaked it, and it was known about and then kind of ignored quietly. But there's a program called PRISM. This is part of the Snowden leaks, and what PRISM does is it basically gives the NSA, and I know the FBI is not the NSA, however, there is interdepartmental sharing of intel, and sometimes some departments that are not authorized to do certain things to the American people may outsource that capability to a department that is. And so the NSA has PRISM, which is a program, not a program in so much that software, but a program as in it's like a group of people doing a thing. And so basically they interface with big tech companies, primarily Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, and a few others. And essentially they have backdoor access to all the information, and they can utilize that and share resources with these tech companies and share intel with them or ask them about certain things. So it's well known that there's been this kind of backdoor relationship between the big tech companies, which would have definitely included Facebook, and the NSA. Now, given that there's a level of comfort or at least familiarity with these big tech companies, with CEOs like Mark Zuckerberg, and interfacing with these government intel agencies, do we think it's the first time that the FBI has ever taken advantage of that comfort or that familiarity and said, hey, we're just like the NSA and we would like to know this information. Do you have it for us? Hey, let's take this relationship one step further. Not just do you have that information, like, hey, can you provide this information to the public? Can you not provide certain information to the public? It seems very obvious that the various government agencies, the quote-unquote deep state, have probably been doing that for, the entire time that these big tech giants have been around, so for at least the last 15 years. And again, the question is, the FBI clearly asked Zuckerberg to, in a nonchalant way, hey, can you censor the Hunter Biden laptop story? Do we think that they didn't do the same thing to Twitter? Do we think that Twitter, all on its own, decided to take the unprecedented step of fully banning the New York Post, for better or worse, a real media outlet, take the unprecedented step of just banning a media outlet's account entirely for the story? Do we think that Twitter did that all on their own, or do we think that maybe somebody gave them a wink and a nod to do that? Maybe the FBI.
Yeah, probably. They probably did, and that on many other stories.
Yep. And so I believe that the House Republicans have vowed that they will be calling Mr. Zuckerberg back to Congress to drink water, as he does very well. He's gotten very good at drinking water.
Almost human.
Almost human. It's almost as human as his metaverse avatar.
So a lot of people got banned off of social media platforms for speaking the truth.
Fox TV's got banned off of Twitter because I suggested that perhaps the next president should have the foreign policy of nuking Iran, which is legitimately protected First Amendment speech, and I was banned for that.
True, but a lot of people were more specifically banned for talking about these various topics that were censored by social media at the behest of the FBI that ended up being true stories, so they only spoke the truth and they got banned. Are they going to ever get unbanned?
No.
Well, those news agencies that were the authoritative sources that were actually spreading disinformation, are they going to get banned?
Well, you see, Dyer, it was correct at the time.
Oh, so doesn't matter if it comes out now that those things were completely false or backwards.
Why are you so worried about the past, Dyer? It's in the past. It's now's the time.
The past are in the now.
Oh, well, I mean, that's just like your opinion, man. One of the big problems with getting banned off social media is that it can often lead to depression. And one thing that depression can lead to is our next story.
Great transition. The left wants to kill you, by the way.
Yes. Or they want better. They want you to kill yourself with their help.
They're going to try to make it as easy as possible for you to die, is basically. Yes. So socialized medicine creates a system where the government is incentivized to kill you.
It's true.
Avoid
and social media gives you a reason.
Yes, as just the one avenue. So under private health care, the health insurance companies benefit if you pay your insurance for a long time but die quickly with little treatment, because they end up paying out very little and you paid in a lot.
Yeah, so they want you to live till 80, not needing any medical requirements, just the bare minimum. And then at 81, you get cancer and die in 6 months. That's what they want.
Or you just get hit by a van or something and die.
Yes.
Like something acute,
Not cute, but acute.
Acute. However, that's just is morbid, but it's true. In a private healthcare system, the insurance company does want you to die quickly after having paid in a lot. However, they do not have the ability to ensure that you die. That's the important difference, right?
Not yet.
They don't have the ability to make sure you die, but they do benefit from it. And they can't prevent you from taking advantages of the services that you paid for because they're restricted by law. They can, try to prove that you, for some reason, you didn't hold up to your part of the bargain. But if you paid for a service, they have to pay it out. So the hospital in a private system provides you the treatment and has the incentive to keep you alive and paying for their services as long as possible. The hospital in a private system wants you to stay alive,
but not necessarily keep you healthy.
That's not healthy. Alive and paying for treatment. It doesn't matter to the hospital if your insurance company loses money, because they just care about getting paid. The government's interest in this situation is for you to survive to pay your taxes.
It sounds like the insurance company is getting screwed here.
Yes, and you are getting a relatively good deal in that no one who has the ability to kill you has the incentive for you to die.
We need to change that.
So under a socialized healthcare system, the hospital and insurance are all part of the government, in which creates an entirely different and perverse incentive. The government, as the insurer, wants you to pay into the system, but they don't want you to get paid out from the system. So, because that would hurt their bottom line. So they would prefer that you die instead of getting treated. So for most of the expensive treatments, that is beneficial for them to have to wait for a very long time to receive them, because they hope that you will die before you receive treatment. And we've seen this
in Canada. You can often be waiting for an MRI or a CAT scan for something like years, like 2 or 3 years. If you've ever had an X-ray or a CAT scan or an MRI here in the States, that probably sounds, well, foreign to you, because you probably got one right away. If you are in a doctor's office or a hospital and they are like, you need an MRI, you're probably going to get one later that day, maybe later that hour, not 2 years from then.
Exactly. So like those socialized medical systems, they brag about, oh, you can get a tooth extracted very quickly and at no cost, right?
No, you can get a tooth extracted at no cost. The very quickly thing that's not a promise.
Okay, not true. So they will give you they'll pay for, and usually faster than specialty care, give you the small cheap things with less problem, right? You'll get the cheap things because that doesn't hurt the bottom line as much. But anything that's specialty care that could be expensive, those things you wait for a very long time.
Like for instance, dentures or an implant.
Right. And we've seen this happen with the VA, where we have soldiers who, as soon as they're no longer in active service, and the government no longer benefits from their survival, they now benefit from their death. So any specialty service you could get, basically any service in general, but definitely a specialty service, it would take years to get seen by a doctor. So someone who has an acute heart problem, who likely will, without treatment, die within a few months, is told they have to be on the waiting list for an appointment for years.
And the veteran suicide rates does appear to be, it can only be explained if it's by design. You actually do see a large number for those that commit suicide that do leave a reason. A lot of it has to do with things that could probably be addressed by or fixed by the VA and just weren't due to waiting lists. And so it does appear, as Dyer said, it is of benefit to the VA, to the government, if, after you're done fighting, you just die. Like it's not of benefit to the government to support you in perpetuity. It's much more better for them if you commit suicide, probably in their lobby. That's of much more benefit to them, even if they have to clean it up, than taking care of you for 40 or 50 more years.
And they also have had studies showing that the VA is very quick to give out drugs that are likely to have the side effects of depression.
Oh, and isn't that so interesting with the revelation last month that SSRIs, the primary drug used for depression, the entire premise of the chemical imbalance theory is completely false. Isn't that so interesting that came out last month after a big study on that? And what is, they have no benefit on reducing depression, yet massively increase the likelihood that you will decide to commit suicide due to a chemical imbalance that they've now induced in your brain. And that's just what we've been giving to soldiers after they come back home. Is just, hey, here, have all these drugs that won't make you feel better and will make you consider suicide.
Right. So we don't give you coping help. They don't give you effective treatment, psychological treatment. We do give you a drug that is likely to make you kill yourself, and then we refuse to see you for long periods of time. And we've had horror stories of someone, a soldier gets issued medicine, and immediately realizes the medicine only made things worse, tries to contact the doctor, and they're like, well, we can't see you for like 4 months, and he kills himself a month later. What
we should be doing is bringing home our military working dogs and then giving them to veterans, because that would make them feel better.
Instead of leaving them in Afghanistan with the Taliban.
Yes.
So the VA is a great example of what socialized medicine does. It creates a perverse incentive where the government benefits when you die.
Yes, it's a great example, and the example is an unprecedented suicide rate, only trumped by the trans community.
We're so going into this. So the government, in this case, would also benefit if you choose to kill yourself rather than receive treatment. For the same reason, like, oh, well, you have a disease that is going to be chronic, that you're going to be suffering from for the rest of your life. Well, that could be expensive, right? So wouldn't you just rather die? Then we have to pay for treatment. The euthanasia drug is far cheaper than your cancer medication. That you might actually beat cancer, but do you really want to risk it?
Which is, I would say, that's probably a driving motivation in a lot of veteran suicides. Anyways, is just the feeling that you're a burden and not useful to society anymore. Because that's a big reason to enlist in the first place, is to have some kind of like benefit for society, feel like you're serving society, and then
meaning in your life.
Yeah, to have the exact opposite, to feel that you are now a drain and burden on society. And that's a big reason why. And then now there's a discussion, at least in other countries, there's discussion in our country. I don't think that there's like a real push for it yet, but there will be, to not just have veterans that think that they're a burden to society, but to have an actual mechanism whereby society tells them, whereby their government tells them, yes, you are actually a burden, and we would like you to kill yourself, because that will only probably reduce the veteran suicide rate. What will they do when, in 10 years, when they want to legalize, assisted suicide for veterans? Are they going to talk about the veteran suicide number anymore? Like, what will happen to that number?
Well, actually, we have stats where countries that have made it legal for there to be euthanasia and assisted suicide, that suicide rates, like not assisted suicide, like people just killing themselves, actually increased.
That's so weird.
Yeah. So even when they have the option of assisted suicide, people just committed suicide more, in addition to the people who committed assisted suicide.
Yep. Am I supposed to read this part?
Yes.
You've been waiting on me to read that for like 5 minutes? Oh,
I have.
just said something. Canada is one such country with socialized medicine that also has legalized and encouraged euthanasia. Canada is extremely liberal euthanasia laws, which next year are set to be extended to include people suffering from mental health conditions likely caused by taking SSRIs, which do not improve mental health, have been slammed for being reminiscent of the way
including minors, by the way.
Including minors. I skipped over that very key part. Potentially also children who have been slammed for their laws. Canada's been slammed for being reminiscent of the way that the Nazis dealt with people with disabilities by a leading academic in the field. The anti-Nazis have become the Nazis. They've resisted committing suicide for long enough to become the thing that they hate. One article from the AP detailed the story of a 61-year-old Alan Nicholas who agreed to euthanasia based on his history of hearing loss and depression. That is like, they have all this money put into like interpreters now, and like there's like the sign language people and everything now, and people are like, wow, hearing loss is it's so debilitating, I'm gonna have to kill myself now. That is depressing.
So this person apparently had bouts of going in and out of depression, and he's had a hearing loss for a while, and his family says that he was just having a bad moment, and a nurse convinced him that instead of suffering through the bad feelings he was having, he should just allow them to kill him. And when he said yes, they did it like quickly, like later that day.
There's a story, I don't know if it's from Canada or from one of the United. I think there's a few U.S. states where it's legal. I think it was Oregon, maybe. I could be wrong on this. Maybe chat can fact check me. But there's a story of a woman who had agreed to do assisted suicide, and then at the time it was to take the pill, she's like, no, you know what, I changed my mind, I don't want it, because it became real, and they like force fed it to her, and then she died. I think that was in Oregon.
Jeez Louise.
But yeah, she like at the last moment she decided to change her mind, and then they were like, no, you've made this decision, like you take the pill now, and they like force fed it to her. Anyways.
So This person, I believe, was also receiving long-term care at their age, and the government was spending a lot of money on keeping this 61-year-old person cared for.
Well, then you shouldn't have passed universal health care. After pleading unsuccessful, again, it's this funny idea of like, okay, well, let's do universal health care, okay, and then now the government's the victim. Well, you can't expect us to pay for it all now. Well, you wanted it, you got the power, So the deal with the devil there with universal health care is that you give the government the power over your health care, and then you get in return free health care, and then all of a sudden the government can turn around and say, well, now we're the victim. Now we have to pay for it all. You can't expect us to pay for it all. That's not fair. Well, yeah, it is. We gave you the power. Well, yeah, but we just wanted the power. We didn't want to have to pay for it, too. After pleading unsuccessfully for affordable housing to help ease her chronic health condition, a Canadian woman ended her life in February under the country's assisted suicide laws. Another woman suffering from the same condition, also living on disability payments, has nearly reached final approval to end her life. So it's just people who are like, had trouble paying rent during COVID.
Yes, these people are being convinced to kill themselves because of inability, their economic problems.
Where's the college loan people at? Where are they at?
Are you saying they should kill themselves?
No, I'm thinking they should have the option.
Oh, okay. Wow. So, another person suffering from a chronic illness, also requiring long-term care provided by the very all-inclusive, I guess, government healthcare system, so costing the government a lot of money to keep him alive. He has a chronic illness, requires regular help from nurses. He actually exposed his nurse aggressively trying to coerce him to agree to assisted suicide, threatening to bankrupt him with medical.
Where's the pictures of these that you had sent me earlier?
What? Oh, shit, I'll pull that up. Sorry.
Yeah. But drop a link in the notes. Sorry, I mean to interrupt you.
Would you mind finish reading my section?
Yeah. So, Canadian Virtual Hospice. Virtual Hospice. How do you virtually do hospice? It's like a support website. Okay,
it's an organization.
Okay, so Canadian Virtual Hospice, which is I assume a nonprofit organization that helps with hospice care, just published a children's quote activity book. Like, where you got coloring and games. Like when you go to like Bob Evans and like the menu or the paper placemat, like on the back of it, there's like puzzles and coloring and stuff, and they give you crayons, and like your kid can do activities while you wait for your food to come. So they published a children's activity book with colorful graphics and large font made for children who are quote suffering from waiting for their Bob Evans. Waiting to encourage them to seek assisted suicide if they are suffering from chronic children's illnesses. Oh no, Dyer sent me a link and then Skype has crashed. It was just too much. It's the FBI. Here is a picture of the cover for Dyer is gone. He's gone forever. His Skype has disconnected. Anyways, so Canadian Virtual Hospice published this book with this cover on it, and you can see how fluffy and lovely it looks. Medical assistance in dying activity book. Welcome. These activities will help you think about medical assistance in dying by someone in your life. So if you're a kid, I don't know, like one of those like cancer kids who's like, 8 and got a bald head and it sucks. And, you got to do whatever you can to get through the day. Maybe you're a Make-A-Wish kid. Well, instead of getting a Make-A-Wish, excitement, like, maybe like drawing a picture with like a famous artist, well, you get to draw a picture in this coloring book where you get to think about killing yourself because you're such a burden to your parents. How lovely. What a lovely place Canada is. Let me see if I can get Dyer back on the line here. Alrighty. Well, I guess not. I guess I'm still broadcasting, I believe. I guess maybe in chat, let me know if I'm still broadcasting. Yeah, I am still broadcasting. It's not me. It's Dyer. All right. Well, maybe we'll finish the show without Dyer. We don't have a lot left. So there was a 32% increase in assisted suicides in Canada in 2021 over 2020. I wonder what caused a 32% increase from 2021 to 2020. With over 10,000 people killed by doctors in Canada. My God. I mean, they probably didn't even give that many CAT scans. Because, you got to wait so long for them. Assisted suicide is not yet legal in the UK, but the left are pushing for it. Dr. Philip Nitschke, wow, like Nietzsche almost, but Nitschke. Wow, a little parallelism there. Dr. Philip Nitschke, an Australian physician living in the UK, known as Dr. Death, provides testing kits that allow people to check the strength of drugs they have bought in order to commit suicide. Wow. Okay, so this guy is selling drug testing kits so you can see if like your suicide pill is strong enough because, that'd be, you want it to work. Okay. So those testing kits are sold in the UK by one of the world's leading health advocates on euthanasia. If it's so great, he should do it himself. The UK, however, doesn't need assisted suicide to kill the poor. The Telegraph reports that negligence and lousy medicine in the UK also push desperate people into assisted suicide, or into suicide, rather than face awful conditions. Basically, the left, globally, is a death cult. They love abortion. They love transitioning and chopping up children at the end. Oh, we have a special call, guys. Who is it? Who do you think it is? Hello? This is Fox.
Hello?
This is Fox. Who is this? Who am I speaking to?
This is Dyer.
Is this the FBI? You have to tell me if you're a cop.
I'm not sure that's true. Anyway, so do you get the picture?
Guys, do we believe that this is Dyer, or do we think this is an FBI agent using Dyer's voice like a skin puppet?
They finally caught up to me.
Yes, they did. We figured you out.
All right.
Chat. We put a 1 in chat if you think Dyer's an FBI informant.
Which chat? All of them?
All the chats. I'm gonna type as many ones as I can. Yes. 1 for every time you think Dyer's false flagged. Me. Okay. Yeah. So we did find the picture, Dyer, and we are we read through the rest of the text. I had just gotten up to the left is a death cult. Would you like to share your thoughts on why you think the left is a death cult?
Yeah, I mean, if them literally trying to get you to kill yourself and them giving you drugs, is it the fact that
they want people to kill themselves?
Yeah, the fact that they benefit greatly from you as an adult killing yourself, and then if you add into that, they also want to kill children before they're born. Call it an abortion, and they also are trying to chop off the dicks and the boobs and sewing up the vaginas of kids, basically sterilizing and mutilating children and then putting them on drugs that will then make them want to kill themselves really badly later on. I think that all these data points added together is that the left is a death cult that just loves causing or getting other people to kill themselves or kill their children.
Yes.
Because they don't do this to their people. Like, Hillary Clinton didn't trans her kid, Yeah.
Well, at least the leaders don't. I mean, like, largely the people that they're trying to convince that would be susceptible to this are leftists. Though, again, it's trying to transition the entire...
No. They are trying to indoctrinate your children and then trans them without you knowing. They're trying to convince people that they should abort their kids.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, though, is that the goal is to transition everybody into leftists, and they're starting with your kids.
Yeah,
they're trying to train them, indoctrinate them, put them into a cult. It's almost like a cult of death.
Like death cult, possibly.
Well, sometimes things are named after what they are. All right, Dyer. Well, we would love for you guys to stay alive for the next show next week. We'll be back.
Yeah, so try to avoid Democrat cities.
Yeah, and if in all honesty, we probably should, as per any segment on suicide. If you or someone you know is having issues or considering certain things, especially if you're living in Canada, there's definitely other options. If you need to, reach out to Dyer and I. don't do it. You don't need to. There's a lot of resources out there to help you consider other things. If there's like a particular problem you're having in your life, you surely can get through it. There's methods and means and ways of getting through every issue that you may have. Death is not the way out.
Yes, it's a very permanent solution to a very temporary problem in most cases. So it's better to get help. Be brave, ask for help, even when it's hard. Because your life does have value, and there are people out there who depend on you. All right, we'll see you guys next show. Dire Wolf out.
Chavez signing off. Don't let somebody false flag you by pretending that they're your friend, but they're really an FBI agent. That's our advice.
You're saying I'm your friend.